Welcome to this special episode of Three Girls, One Deck. And we, upon request, have decided to do an episode dedicated to just the literary tarot. So hello to anyone lurking, coming in, people watching the playback. Hello, Tammy Ann. So, yeah, the literary tarot. Heather and Sarah had backed this deck, and so they are more in the know of all the kind of drama that preceded the process and all that. I was gifted the deck after the fact. And also, yeah, with the kind of suggestion of like, hey, if we feel so inclined, it might be fun to dedicate an episode to this. And I, given just kind of all the hubbub and everything, and I'm an English major, yes, but I've been, so I was curious just because of all the hype and just, yeah. So when it was offered to me, I jumped up on the chance to take a look. So we will be talking about how we all feel about this deck. Hello, Laura Aquamarine 18, Tarot and Books. Hello, B, Kelly Sunflower. Hello, Luna Liss, and anyone else coming in. Okay, so why don't we, yeah, Laura's saying, been looking forward to this, as have we. I think this will be an interesting conversation. And it's so funny because we were talking before going live, and Heather and I were saying, like, this is such a Sarah deck. This is such
it really is.
So ironic because I'm an English major and I taught literature and writing for a time, and this is like, and I don't know so many of these stories, and like I'm like the worst English major fail in the world. But so yeah, and Heather and I are more like, yeah, we're not so highbrow as we like to believe.
As I explained, like the only reason, so I have read quite a large number of the source material for this deck, and the only reason for that is because like I went through a period in like high school and college where I was like, I want to be this like cool intellectual person who's like read all these classic novels, and so I like forced myself to read a shit ton of these books, and it was like about wanting to be cool. It was not about actually being cool in any way, shape, or form. Like there was no like I'm not educated in literature or anything. I just
But you are though. But you are educated.
I don't know like literary interpretation or anything like that. I just like read a bunch of books. Like that's all it is. So yeah.
True. And also, yeah, we say this to Sarah with love. Like honestly,
it's something we love about her.
Yeah, this is what we love about her, which is that.
But you can see it. You can see it in all of our like Three Girls, One
Deck.
Yeah. Within those deck choices, Sarah's are always like really well thought out and have real
very
like,
high art,
classic art, and all of that kind of stuff. And mine and Julie's are like
sophisticated.
It's got funny faces in it, and it makes me giggle.
That's not true at all. That's not true at all. Come on.
Anyway, so yeah, but hey, the three of us work. That's why the three of us work out. So
funny faces too.
Yeah. Okay, so hello, Early Ritual. Anyone else coming in?
Talking about it though, like. I think maybe even 5 years ago, but definitely 10 years ago, this deck would have given me like serious, not self-esteem issues. That's a bit dramatic of what I'm trying to say, but going through it would have made me go, I'm so uneducated.
Yeah,
like I don't read and blah, blah, blah. Whereas now I'm kind of at that point where I'm like, do you know what? I like what I like.
Yeah.
No, classics is not necessarily what I like, and I'm kind of okay with that.
Yeah. Oh, I'm definitely okay. I mean, how do you think I feel being the English major who went to graduate school for?
Yeah, at least I didn't do that.
Yeah. So and then come to find with this deck, the literary term, like I never read this, I don't remember this. If I've read this, which I think I did, I don't remember. So anyway, it's like I'm sure I taught this, but I don't remember. Anyway, okay, so what do we want to kind of just go around and give some general thoughts and overall impressions of how we feel about the deck, and we talk about some of the ways we maybe like, looked into it, maybe used it, etc.
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
You want to go first?
Oh,
Sure.
yeah.
What? Where am I? What?
We all want to go first. Normally, none of us want to go first.
Heather will go first. I'm nominating Heather.
I'm not gonna show any cards or anything at this point.
No.
Yeah. Like an overview of the deck. Like I do. So I went through it this morning again, and just like literally just looking at the cards, and there are about only 32 cards, I think, in the deck, where either I get it because I know the story well enough, or I get it because even though I don't know the story, I think the image is good enough that it makes sense from a tarot perspective. So, and when I was going through it, I was like, and I wasn't counting, and I was just pulling them out. And I was going, oh, I like this one, and I like this one, and oh, I quite like this one, and this makes sense to me. And I was thinking, oh, you know, my pile looks pretty decent. It's like I did pull them all out. It's a pretty decent size. I'm happy with that. And then I looked at the numbers, and I was like, it's still less than half the deck, and actually half the deck doesn't make sense to me, either because I don't know the story and there's not enough information in the guidebook, or I don't know the story and the image doesn't connect to what I know about that particular card.
Right.
And I don't know at this moment in time if I like it, the ones that I like enough to put in the effort to get over that 50% of the deck hump.
Yeah.
Is kind of where I'm at with it right now.
Because I remember in, I think it was the last monthly recap that we did, you had mentioned this tarot deck. So remind us, how did you like use it? Did you were you doing like daily draws? Were you, or just kind of, daily draws and any readings and such?
Yeah, I did. And I did a bit of both. So I was using it for daily draws for a few weeks. And then I was doing, like I always do every month, I always do at least 2 readings, because I always do one for the new moon and one for the full moon. So I always do at least those 2. If I really enjoy a deck, then I'll pull it out and I'll do other stuff throughout the month, which interestingly I didn't with this one. I only did those 2. But I found that either I was going to the guidebook and then looking at other guidebooks as well, or I was just falling back on the tarot knowledge that I already have, which is fine. Like in theory, I think all 3 of us are definitely at that point where you can give us any deck and we can just read with it.
Absolutely.
Because we know tarot. We know at least the RWS system.
You can make it work. Yeah.
You can make it work, but I don't know if I want to just make it work.
Exactly. Like that's not the full-on experience that we necessarily want with the deck. And just to clarify for anybody who might not be super familiar with like the literary tarot. So Heather, you just opted for this book, right? This little book that comes with the deck.
I literally just bought the deck with the books. I didn't buy anything extra.
With the Kickstarter, there is also, this was also an option as like I guess a different backer kit or something that you could opt for this add-on. So what I will say is that with this, hi Antoinette, hi Tony, with this essentially, hold on, let me open this up. So what you get here, shine, sorry, like right there, sorry, image. This right here is essentially a copy of what's in here. So what you get in here is that, and then the rest of this is basically, how did the chosen like contemporary author, like how did they come upon pairing this story with this particular card? And sometimes they might get a little bit into like the plot or the reasoning, sometimes not even. It was more just about like why they went with, this story to this card, which in several cases, like, well, this card was taken, but they really wanted to use this story. So they, we offered some other different card options that they could maybe fit this into, which really kind of chafed my ass after a while.
Yeah, I mean, I had a couple of issues with that. I mean, namely, first of all, there is no useful guidebook provided with this deck, which is a useful guidebook would have been a guidebook that at least gives you a summary of the plot line of the work at issue and a little bit of analysis as to why it made sense to pair it with that card, which
Exactly.
they give you like the tiniest little bit of that thought
Tiniest bit.
process, but it's like barely any.
Barely
And
anything.
they
Yeah.
definitely don't give you the plot line of the story. The
Yes.
second thing is that if you read the big guidebook, what it makes clear is that all of these current authors who picked works for the deck basically just showed up with a book they like.
Yes,
Like,
exactly.
and then
Exactly.
the editors of the deck had to be like, okay, how about the 6 of ink? You
Yeah.
know, like, so it's like not
It was so
the process of
frustrating.
pairing was not like so intentional, you know.
Yeah.
In other cases, it was just like some
Oh,
current author was super committed to some
to
book
this
they really
book for
like and
sure.
wanted to
Mhm.
include it, and the editors had to like figure out some way to fit it in, you
Or
know.
yeah, and like certain cards were already taken, or certain
Right.
stories were already
Already
taken.
taken. Right,
So it's
exactly.
like they're just trying to like jigger in and try to like, you know,
Yeah.
fit like puzzle pieces where it just, and they were just making they were trying too hard in a lot of cases, in my opinion. And so instead of I think for me anyway, this larger book backfired in that I think the intention was to make us really invested in their kind of process for why they chose the story to go with the card. And I'm thinking, you guys are doing this bass backward. Like this is so frustrating to read because, and clearly this just kind of shows well, I just don't prescribe to this process. And given the three of us made a deck, right? This is not how we went about
No.
it.
And I think a big part of the problem is that they just didn't go, like, the whole thinking just didn't go far enough. So they had authors who knew their literature very well and who picked stories that they knew very, very well, but they didn't go that extra step and actually take time to understand the tarot, not just the card that they were given, but as a system.
As a system, exactly.
And I think that shows.
Oh, it
some
definitely
of the
shows.
choices, I think it shows that the authors had no concept of the tarot as a system and were just told, this is the card you've got. This is kind of the general meaning of what that card is.
Right.
If you can pick a story that fits that, fab. But if you can't and you've got another story, we'll just use that one instead.
Like, I don't think that was even the process. The way the process is described in the book, the author showed up with a story and then the creators had to make a connection to a card. Like it wasn't even go to an author and say, we need a story on this general theme.
Oh, right. Yes. That's
pick a story. No. It was the author being like, I really like Romeo and Juliet. And the deck creators being like, shit, I don't know, the Page of Pentacles. Like, you know,
it was really,
that's how it was done. Yeah.
To me, it was very bass backward in that way because it's like, they came with a story and either that story was taken, you know, was for use, or like or maybe the author had the idea of like the story and the card they wanted to pair it up with, but like the card was taken, you know, and it's like any combination of, they were, especially if they had a particular preference of keeping that story, like they really wanted to use the story. Well, like, here's some other ways that we could fit, like here's some other tarot cards that are free, still available. No one's claimed them. You know, maybe, and even those alternative options, I'm like reading them. I'm like, oh, wow, that's really reaching. That is really reaching to use that story for that particular card. Okay. So I just found the guidebook to be useless.
Useless.
So anyway, let me just kind of,
I mean, the guidebook is useful if you're using the deck in the way that like Antoinette's talking about, where it just using it as an RWS deck.
Right.
In that way it's useful because it does tell you about, at least the small one is about the card meaning. So in that way it's useful. And if that is what you want from this deck and you just, you know, I think it's, you either, for it to work for you, you either need to fall into one of two camps. You either need to just treat it as any other RWS and read it that way, and that's what you want and you're happy with it, that's what you've got. Or you're like Sarah, who's read a large amount of the books and has the knowledge to be able to make those connections. And then anybody who kind of falls in the middle, who's looking for it to do something specific because, you know, I've got the RWS deck. Like I don't really need a fancy one. I've got So if you kind of fall in the middle where you don't want just another RWS deck, but you also don't have the knowledge, that's where this deck I think lets you down, because it doesn't give you the knowledge to be able to develop that and use it in a way that's like, Antoinette's used the word shallow. I wouldn't say shallow or deep. I don't know if it's necessarily that, but I think maybe it is deep. Maybe if you do want to dive deep with this deck, it just doesn't give you the tools to be able to do that.
Yeah. It doesn't. Yeah. So, and I guess the thing that I will say, because I feel like my discussion of their process sort of implies that I don't think that they actually ultimately did a good job of pairing up the cards with which actually isn't true. Like,
Sarah likes the deck.
I like the deck. I think they went about the process backwards. And what they should have done is take a card and be like, these are the themes of this card. Go to an author and be like, what's your favorite story that speaks to these themes? You know, like that. Start with the tarot. If you're making a tarot deck, start with tarot. Right? Like that's basic. But I do think that the ultimate product they ended up with, in my personal opinion, does a very good job, with a few exceptions, does a very good job of matching up the themes of the tarot with the themes of the stories. And so, you know, so despite the fact that I think they went about it backwards, as Julie said, I ultimately like the deck and I like the pairings that they chose. But the one thing that you should do with a deck like this, like, presume that not everybody has read all of these books, and make a freaking guidebook that gives you a plot damn book, so that you can that's the bare minimum you could do, is a guidebook that gives you a short description of the plot of the story and is like, that's how this story speaks to the Wheel of Fortune. You know, like that's like, that should have been a requirement, and yet that is the one thing they didn't do, and that sort of drives me crazy about the process.
Blew my mind. I'm just like, anyway, so I totally agree that I did not hate the deck. I did not love the deck. I think there are certainly worse decks out there. So I think for the fact that they clearly did not kind of view tarot or pair up the stories with the tarot in the sense of focusing on the tarot, not just also in terms of like isolated cards, but as a system as a whole, and how we use tarot. Even despite that, like, this is like, to me it was a decent deck. Is it a usable deck? Well, I used it for daily draws to, well, more than anything, to familiarize myself, like to like pull a random card, see, oh, do I even recognize what's going on here? Like, does this image isolated in and of itself, without even maybe knowing the story, would I be able to get a sense that this is, you know, I don't know, the three of ink, whatever. Like, does this make sense to me? So in that respect, it was a very mixed bag, because I think that the deck, I think that they did in several cards a good job of like visually representing the card in such a way that, had I not known the story, and Heather was saying this before too, that if, despite our maybe not knowing the story, we have that knowledge of RWS, the tradition imagery, that we can still be able to look at that image and understand and be able to use that image and make that connection with the archetype. Mm-hmm. Whereas with other images, it's like, well, I have no fucking clue how this pertains to, like, you know, the King of Light. I don't know the story. I don't know how this image even is supposed to lend to this archetype. Like, it just makes, I don't know. So that in that case, I'd have to rely on the guidebook, which then, I can't rely on the guidebook because it doesn't really give me an explanation.
That information.
So in that way, it was very frustrating too. Mm-hmm. So for me, I guess it was a mixed bag, but I would say that it's not the worst of decks. You know, I think that I used it actually in one of my lunar spread readings, and it actually read well. It actually read well. I mean, there was one card I kind of had to make work. You do that, but
mm-hmm.
But is this something, like, again, to Heather's point, is this something that I really want to have to work at? And then leave that reading being like somewhat frustrated that, like, I don't agree with this pairing, or this image does nothing for me, etc. So
Yeah, I do want to mention Tony's comment here. Tarot of the Divine was better executed with the guidebook, mini guide, synopsis, and companion book with it. And the companion book in that one almost wasn't even a mini rundown of the stories. It pretty much kind of told the whole story.
Exactly. It was the story. Yeah.
Which I really liked. And I know people were mad about that deck because they were mad about the fact that they had to buy a separate book to get that full rundown of the stories. But like, think about how mad I am about this one, where I did buy that. And I still didn't get the mini rundown of the stories. Like, what's that bullshit? Like,
so tell you the one that actually does it brilliantly is the Seams Tarot, because the guidebook that comes with it, I mean, it's a PDF guidebook, but every single card tells the actual story and it makes sense. And it's like, it's, I'm on the fence about that deck and whether or not I'm going to keep it. But in terms of the guidebook and being able to make those connections between card choice and the story, it is.
That's the way it should have been done for sure.
Yeah.
Because you get the context, and then is clear connection between why that story was chosen for that particular card.
Yeah.
You know, there's no guessing. And so I agree. I totally agree. Okay, well, do we want to start going into maybe some particular cards that we...
I think there's one sorry. One other thing that I think that we all kind of wanted to address, which was the way that the suits have been renamed.
Yes.
Because I think we all have a little bit of an issue. Like, so the way that the suits have been renamed in this deck are wands are ink, cups are light, swords are quills, and pentacles are parchment. And I am cool with those last two. Quills for swords, parchment for pentacles. Perfect. Yes, makes total sense.
Yeah.
I think we all think that light and ink should have been swapped because like light for wands, ink for cups. Like what? It makes no sense at all. So I don't know what they were thinking, but you know.
I forget every time I look at it and I pull a card out and it's like, oh, it's the King of Lights. Wait, what was that again? Is that wands? No, wait, is that cups? And I have to look them up every time, those two, because my brain is just like, no, I refuse to accept the decision that you've made here. It makes no sense to me.
Well, and I was even saying before we got online, like, even if you think about just like the order of operations of things, just to help it make sense to you, right? Like, you know, when you are writing a book, you turn on the light, you get out your ink bottle, you dip your quill in, and then you write on the paper. And so if you think wands, cups, swords, pentacles, which is the order I always think of the suits in, like, then it makes sense. Like light, ink, quill, paper, like that all makes sense. But they swapped the ink and the light, and it just, I'm like, I don't, why would you do that? That is so silly. So anyway, and so that's another overarching issue that we all have with the deck. But again, I just do need to say that I still do like the deck. I really like it. I'm going to use it. So, but
that is awesome.
There's definitely some significant criticism.
I mean, it's beautiful. Like, also, I will say it's a really pretty deck. I think the art's really cohesive. You know, I'm not typically a fan of the kind of shiny gold, you know, gilding and stuff, but that's just a personal thing. But I know I like the bling. I like the backs. I just think overall this was, you know, it's a beautiful deck.
What else I really like is there's like 3, maybe 4 artists for this deck. And you would never know.
You would never know.
If they hadn't put that in the guidebook, you would never know. The artist style is so cohesive across the entire deck that I would have thought it was one artist.
Yeah. Exactly.
Well, another thing that I actually really liked about the deck is that, like, despite the fact that they obviously picked a lot of classic novels that don't contain an actual lot, or if any, diversity in those novels whatsoever, they actually created a diverse deck. Like, they actually just like disregarded that fact. And you know, the deck was colorblind casting. Like, they you know, they drew people of whatever race, or, you know, they did it however they wanted. So and I like that about it too, because that, you know, I mean, that's a major problem with just doing a deck based on all of these like old ass stories, like hundreds of years ago,
from the old boys club.
You're gonna end up with a non-diverse deck unless you actually you know, do something about that, which they did, which I appreciate. So
no, absolutely, that's a great point.
There's no reason why Elizabeth Bennet can't be Black, right? Like, I mean, sure.
Absolutely. And it just I didn't even think about it too. You know what I mean? It's like when I went through, I mean, of course, like I appreciated it, but it just never, it felt very natural. You know, it didn't feel too forced or anything. You know, I didn't feel it reductive or anything. It was like, yeah, this is cool, you know? So great point. But okay. So did I miss any other comments? Okay, so how do we want to go about this? Do we just kind of want to go through all the cards and kind of, or how did we say we were going to do this before?
I mean, I think that, you know, we kind of talked about each of us talking about a few cards that maybe we really liked or that made a lot of sense to us.
Yeah.
As well as some other cards that maybe we didn't like so much or that didn't make a lot of sense to us. So we can definitely do that. And I don't know if you guys have that together yet.
No.
Okay.
I mean, I can easily do that because I don't really have a lot in that. I did not feel very strongly just in general with the cards that I liked versus the cards that I just felt no way about because I don't know the story or that I just, you know, I didn't care for. I thought that they were over, you know, they were just like reaching or it didn't fly with me. So I felt very, I don't know, kind of not very strongly just in general about this deck, if that makes any sense.
Yeah. I mean, I did, but I'm sorry. I'm talking.
So why don't we, well, let's focus on the majors. So why don't we at least go like in order of suits? Sure. So in the majors, were there any cards that we particularly loved?
Yeah, of course.
Of course.
Of course I love the moon. I can Alice in Wonderland.
Yes, I was going to say, as soon as I saw that, I'm like, yep, Heather's happy.
I'm okay. I can live with everything else.
Yeah. One thing I do want to mention as well is that they did give us, you had the opportunity to buy a booster pack of extra cards for certain major arcana cards. And I did end up swapping in some cards from the booster pack cards were voted on by the Kickstarter backers. And so what that ended up giving us was some extra cards. We got a couple of extra lovers cards. Yes. We got an extra magician. We got an extra death. We got an extra moon. And so there were some, and some of the ones that the Kickstarter backers voted on, I actually preferred to what their original choices were. So,
and I can show real quick actually, because I have them all separated here. So
like for example, an alternate magician was a Nancy, which I have never read the book that was used for the original magician card. So I substituted this one in. I liked it better. They gave us, so the original Lovers was from The Age of Innocence by Edith Wharton, which is a book that I've never actually read the book. I've like seen the movie, but I've never read the book. So and they had an alternate option of Hades and Persephone, as well as an alternate option of Achilles and Patroclus, both of which I liked better. I have Hades and Persephone in there right now, but I might do the Achilles and Patroclus one. I will say that Laura from Aquamarine 18 did have, and she mentioned it here, there was a discussion about having LGBT inclusion for the Lovers, which is how the Achilles and Patroclus pairing came about. And I will say, Laura, you mentioned somewhere, and I can't remember.
I think it was in the comments.
If there's going to be an alternate Lovers that's LGBT, like it should be free. Like you shouldn't have to pay.
Yes, exactly.
I totally agree with that.
Yes.
But I will say that I did like the alternate Lovers better than what they had. I mean, not to say that I like them better. I have more connection to that story. The original one makes sense. Like the original Lovers of Age of Innocence, like that makes sense. But I like the other ones better. So
and I will say, like so here are some of the other ones that weren't mentioned. So here is the alternate death, which is, this is what the Mask of the
Red Death.
Mask of the Red Death Poe. Beautiful. We have the star, right? Yeah, the star. Amaterasu, I think. Is that and the cave? And then we have the moon.
Yeah.
What was this? This was the myth of the crap. I don't remember.
Mm-hmm.
I'm terrible. Anyway, just the point I want to make is like what I appreciate about this booster pack is that these are examples of like, even if you don't know necessarily the story, like you look at this as death, like isn't this death vibes? I mean, like, you know, like I feel like with any of these, I might not necessarily know the story, but I can still glean something from the images alone.
Mm-hmm.
And also my knowledge of like tarot RWS, you know. So I like in the magician that Sarah showed, like I don't know this story at all. And yet this is definitely a magician card. Like this feels like a magician card, you know. These lovers cards feels like lovers cards, you know. So that's what I appreciated about the booster pack. But anyway, okay. So where were we? Well, what am
we were talking through the majors.
The majors, yes. And we were talking about Alice in Wonderland as the moon, which I also kept my Alice the Wonderland for the moon. What else?
Yeah, I mean, so from my standpoint, I'm sorry, you guys, I'm talking too much.
No, you're not.
I have so many opinions and thoughts.
You like this deck the best. That makes this.
I do like the best. I genuinely do like most of the majors. The ones that I feel like were maybe a little bit forced, and not even forced so much as like this works, but I could have, there's many better options that you could have chosen from the world of literature, like Poirot as the emperor. Like, okay, fine, you know, that's fine. Why wasn't he in the sword suit? No,
exactly.
Like,
exactly.
Okay, it works. Captain Nemo as the Hierophant. Like, there's so many better things that you could pick there. Again, like I get their reasoning, but I feel like it's a little bit forced.
Yeah.
And then there's the Temperance card, which is a story I've never heard of.
I hated that card.
Yeah. I'm like, what? This does not look like Temperance. And I've never heard of this story.
No, I mean, and
it's a short story to like, again, there's so many different things that you could have gone with here.
Yeah.
This is a very forced choice in my opinion.
So it is like, it's The Cold Equations by Tom Godwin. So I will say, you know, the cards that you mentioned, the Emperor, the Hierophant. Yes, I totally agree that story-wise, it would have been, there could have been much better choices. But again, like what I like about the image, if you even just look at the image, if you know nothing about this story, you can still use, I can still be okay with this card. Even with the Emperor, you know, Captain Nemo, you can clearly see he's the one in charge. He's the one, you know, you've got these people here. He's kind of guiding them. Like even if I don't know the story, I can make an image like this work. And I can tell a story in my head about how this works with.
I feel that way about a lot of the majors, actually. A lot of the majors, I'm like, I have just enough knowledge, like the Justice card. I know just enough about the Count of Monte Cristo that I can understand that choice. Yes. But I also think just the image works quite well.
Exactly.
Judgment is another one. You know, they're clearly rowing over the river Styx, which just makes sense.
Right. And even like Vanity Fair, you know, like Vanity Fair. I read this like a really, really long time ago.
It's a perfect Wheel of Fortune.
It's a great, but again, if you don't even know what Vanity Fair is about, like they give you enough in the image that you can work with.
I don't know Vanity Fair at all. I don't know the story. I don't know what it's about. I don't think it's my type of book. I don't think it's what I'm ever going to read.
It is not.
even if that card had no titles on it or anything, I would immediately be able to say that must be the Wheel of Fortune. Exactly. And that's good enough for me.
Yeah.
I'm happy with that.
So the Temperance card, this quote throws me off. Any stowaway discovered, and then shall be sorry, I don't have my glasses on.
Well, and I went and read a synopsis of that story, and like nothing about that. So like the synopsis of that story, apparently, because I went and looked it up because I'd never heard of it.
I don't know.
The synopsis of the story is that this guy in a spaceship is delivering a shipment of medicine to some far-flung part of space where they desperately need this medicine. He discovers a stowaway, but the presence of the stowaway means that now he no longer has enough fuel to deliver the medicine. So the question is, what do? Do you throw the stowaway off the ship so that you can get the medicine where it's needed? Or do you what do you do in this situation? And so, okay, cool. Like, that's a very interesting story.
How does it pertain to temperance?
That's not temperance to me. Like,
again, like the balance of, you know, the weight of the ship, I suppose, and the choice he has to make to maintain. But even again, this image, I was just like, what? The image, I just like, again, if I were to look at this image, just kind of like not knowing the story, which I don't know the story, it's kind of like, how is this? How
is it temperance? Like, and this, I just want to share this from Early Ritual, because this for me perfectly sums up, like, is just a perfect summary of, I think, what we're saying, how I feel. It's like the deck, if the deck just works out the box, fantastic, and anything on over that should be an enhancement, but this deck doesn't completely work straight out the box for me. That is my issue. Right.
Absolutely. Yes. Agreed.
There's better other cards
for sure. And that's what I was, you know, and I kind of felt this way about, you know, other stories chosen, and I was like, like Emperor, for instance, I was like, that is swords to me. That's more swords. You know, certain stories I'm just like, that would have been more of an cups, or this would have been a better. I just felt myself thinking that more often than not. But yeah, temperance is one of my least favorite cards of the deck.
But I tell you one that does it really well, that we were talking about earlier, in the other way around, is the Seven of Ink. Is I mean, despite the fact that ink is not cups, is actually wands, which throws me. I think this story for this card, I've never heard of it. Thank you, Julie. I've never heard of it. Don't know what it's about. Is it Biscalver or something like that? It's clearly
Bisclavre, yeah,
something like that. And it's I don't know what it's about. I saw something earlier, very briefly, about somebody who gets turned into a wolf, I'm guessing. But the card, just the imagery, it looks like a Seven of Wands to me. It just has that whole defending yourself, being the outlier, and defending who you are and what you stand for, even when you're on like the outside kind of thing. It just does that so well.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter to me that I don't know the story. Having the story would be that enhancement that Early Ritual's talking about.
Yes, absolutely. And just going back, I think we had mentioned, we were talking a little bit about the Lover's card, but like, and the thing about, okay, so this is the image of the Lover's card, right? Age of Innocence, which I understand why they chose it. And my thing is, if you're going to use the Age of Innocence, then why not make this more Marseille style? Show both May and Ellen.
Yeah.
With what is his name? Newland. Because this as an image gives me nothing. To work with in terms of the, you know, the lovers and the meanings. Whereas it would have been much better had they put, because I'm assuming this is Ellen and that's Newland, if they put May in and have it more kind of like a Marseille style, like
choice between
so it's just little things like that where
and that's another situation where, knowing the story, then you know the choice aspect, like then you're like, oh, I can the story is a fine choice for the lovers, like on every level, like it works as a story for the lovers, and it gets at a lot of the nuances of the card, but again, unless you have actually like read the book or seen the movie, as in my case, like, you won't know, you know, that those nuances are present in that story. So
so anything like in the, are we good? I think the majors I feel were pretty strong overall. Like they're okay.
Yeah. You know? For the most part, I think the majors were either, for me, the choices either made perfect sense because I know the story, like Frankenstein as the hermit, Moby Dick as the devil. Like I get all of those kind of choices.
Sure.
Or the imagery is well done to the point
Exactly.
where I would know what that card was, even if it wasn't titled in any way. And what the story is kind of extra info and doesn't really matter so much.
Exactly.
Yeah, I thought that the majors worked really. I mean, some of the choices, like I think Prufrock as the Hanged Man is really pretty inspired. You know, I think that I was actually pretty delighted that Emily of New Moon was the star, because I love that book. And like, you know, there's 2 L.M. Montgomery books in this deck, which is delightful to me.
Yes,
Like
thought of you.
She's a favorite of mine. You know, Judgment as Dante's Inferno. I mean, very like really well chosen in a lot of cases. The Wife of Bath's Tale as the Empress. Like, I mean, there's some really smart, fun, inspired choices, I feel like, in the majors that I just really appreciated. So another card though that I didn't like as much was the Tower. And again, it's because this is it's Lovecraft, which like come on, the guy had issues, you know, but also like a specific like Lovecraft short story. I feel like there's so much more you could have done with this card than just pick a random Lovecraft short story. And I also think that they had, just based on what I read in the guidebook, they had a kind of narrow view of the meaning of the Tower. I mean, they even say in the guidebook, like, the Tower is the one card in tarot that is always negative. And I'm like, that's not actually true. That's not true. But, you know, so I feel like they could have done a better job with that one as well. And like, I mean, think of all of the possible towers that you could have, you know, I mean, going all the way back to Greek tragedy, like there's so many tower possibilities. But so that one I was like, nah, I could have done better there. So like the Tower and the Temperance are the 2 where I was just like, I really feel like that was lazy, or just, you know, could have done a better job with that. So the rest though, I mean, Don Quixote as the Fool, like Cordelia as the High Priestess, like there's some really, Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, like there's some really good choices. I feel like in the majors that are well paired.
I just wonder though, like I don't wonder, it's just popped into my head, so I'm going to say it out loud. But I wonder if it's because for me, I just found the majors worked generally a lot better than the minors did. There were a lot of minor cards that I liked, but on the whole, I think the majors were better done than the minors. And I wonder if that's because if you're not tarot proficient, the majors are much easier to get to grips with.
I agree.
The themes of the majors are much easier to get to grips with than the theme or the meaning of each minor card, because you have to take into account the number and the suit and blah blah blah. And I just wonder if that that was my entire train of thought. I was repeat myself.
I was actually thinking the same thing, in that, you know, again, given their knowledge of tarot, or maybe, you know, not as, given that they aren't as proficient, say, not, you know, they don't have years of experience, and the way they went about the process, it would make sense that the majors are the strongest, because I think those are the ones that are just so full on, and most people can get. I mean, maybe I'm overgeneralizing, but for myself, and I feel like a lot of people, like the majors are like, those are the big ones. Those are the big ones. And then you get into the suits, which are like, you know, ace through 10, then the courts. And so it's a lot more. So I do tend to agree with that. Which is, you know, again, not to say that the minors and, you know, the courts, there's some good ones. There's some good ones which we can talk about. Now, if we get into like the ink, so yes, I would say to Heather's point, the 7 of ink, which is wands, for anybody coming in and being super confused about renaming.
I have had this deck for weeks and I'm still super confused.
I agree. This is, I'm just going to show it again. This was one of my favorites. This was one of my favorites of the suit.
There's a few of the inks that I actually quite like.
Yeah. I mean, on the whole, I didn't think the ink suit was as an issue for me as maybe some of the other suits. You know, go ahead.
So this again is going to be me, like, just saying, I actually think that the vast majority of these cards, in my personal opinion, are well chosen. Like, so, I mean, we've got like Peter Pan is the ace, the Jungle Book is the 2, A Room with a View is the 3, the 4 is one that I'm not familiar with, but the image really works. Scarlet Pimpernel totally works. The Iliad totally works. So there's, I mean, I feel The Most Dangerous Game actually is like a really great choice for
that's an excellent choice. I was going to mention that. The Dangerous Game, excellent choice.
So there's a lot of really, really good choices in all of these cards, where I think that they are actually, I love Lizzie Bennet as the Queen of Wands. Like that's a great choice, you know? So, aside from a few cards, generally speaking, I really like the vast majority of the pairings. But and again, I do think that in this suit, in the instances where, you know, the immediate image was like at the very least referential to the RWS card, like it made it so that the suit pretty much all made sense to me in this case. So
yeah, and I think, and also again, I think it comes down to like how much we know the stories and how much, and also for me, I think I was definitely focusing a lot on, again, the visuals and how much, if I don't know the story, how much of that visual does just lend for me to being able to use it kind of isolated to the story, right? So in which case, like I would say, yeah, for all of, for image wise, for this suit in general, I think most of them worked for me. You know, I've never read the Scarlet Pimpernel, never read it. So, I mean, looking at this image as the 5 of Wands or the 5 of ink, whatever. Yeah. This was a little bit like, I wasn't, you know, image itself, I'm like, oh, this doesn't feel necessarily 5 of Wands to me, as more as like a 2 of some, you know, like a dual. So again, like without my knowing what the story is about, I'm just like, oh, image wise, I don't know.
But also, I don't. The King of Ink doesn't work for me. It just
I hated that one.
I love War of the Worlds. The story I know very well. You know, I grew up listening to the Jeff Wayne's version. My dad had it. I still cannot make the connection between the King of Ink and the War of the Worlds. I just, like, in my head, when I'm looking at the image and the story and the card and combining them all together, I'm like, I'm so lost by this choice.
Because I think the reason is, and this is because you do not have this larger book, but it talks about how the author was kind of making it about so this is how it reads. So so this was chosen by author Brian Michael Bendis, who I don't know
who that is. No.
Anyway, so he's given, like, you know, alternatives and whatever. And he was like, I will take the Queen of Wands, ink. Brian told us, I wonder if I could get away with this card being my impression of the literary vision of the author. This book was miles ahead of the curve. So to me, this is more, then it made it sound like, okay, so it's less about like the themes of the book rather than it is about the author. And author into, like, just in general, like, and so I'm just kind of, to me, that was a huge disconnect. I'm like, now I'm more confused than I ever was.
Yeah.
Like, and how this image works. This doesn't work for me at all. I hated it. This was another one I didn't care for.
Yeah. I just didn't get it. I don't get it.
And I've never read this one either. So
I haven't read it, but I know the story well enough. Yeah. I feel like I have enough knowledge that if the connection was there, I should be able to see it. Yeah. But for me, it just doesn't.
And that quote just pissed me off because I'm like, oh, can I get away with this? Can we make this work?
Yeah.
Let's do it.
Yeah. There were definitely a few where it was like, okay, editors of the Literary Tarot, you like lay down the law with these authors a little bit better, because, like, you know, I mean, make a tarot deck, please. Like, like, you know, that's what we're trying to do here, is make a tarot deck, not just like accommodate whatever random thoughts authors have. So,
and if you want to encourage people who, you know, tarot people, I'm not saying tarot people are unread, that's not what I'm trying to say here, but if you want to encourage tarot people who haven't read some of these books to read these books, which you're a literary company that promotes
literacy,
then
Yeah.
do a good job with the tarot deck, and then people who like, I would be more inclined to go and read some of these books that I may not have picked up otherwise if all the ones that I know were well done and there wasn't that kind of like the, I'm jumping ahead, but the Page of Pentacles page of, where she's like, the author wrote a retelling of Romeo and Juliet. That is what she does. That is what she loves. She was determined to have Romeo and Juliet as her story.
Try to make it work. And
she just threw it, and she didn't even try and make it work. She just went, I'm using this story.
Yeah. And the write-up, like the entry in the guidebook, it was just like, what?
Yeah.
Like, what?
Yeah. And it was clear that it was like late in the project, and they like had no cards left.
They had no cards.
What card could we associate Romeo? The Page of Pentacles, sure, because they had to do stuff, right? Like, I mean, it was literally
that happened.
Yeah. I mean, it was just so bad.
So Laura at Aquamarine 18 is saying they could have made an oracle and possibly had an
yeah. And I wonder if the reason that they chose tarot and not oracle is because they just thought the oracle tarot would sell better.
Could be.
Like, that's really cynical of me, but I do wonder if
that makes sense. Sure.
What came down, like, what is more likely to have a larger audience?
Yeah.
Because
well, and I think in general, tarot is kind of more recognizable mainstream than an oracle deck. Like,
which is what I mean.
You ask Joe Schmo, like, oh, have you heard of, like tarot before? Like, they'll have an idea of what a tarot deck is and what it might be used for, albeit maybe stereotypical and all those misconceptions. But then, but if you ask like somebody out on the street, hey, do you know what an oracle deck is? Chances are, if they're not into like divination, they're going to be like, no. No clue at all. So that does make sense.
Well, and this is also where like I will jump in and defend the creators a little bit, because I don't think it was purely a cynical choice, because I genuinely do think that in the vast majority of cases, they did actually do a very good job of pairing. Like they did. If you're familiar with the story,
yes,
in the vast majority of cases, they are very good pairings, actually, with a few like glaring exceptions, such as the Page of Parchment. They did do a good job. So I don't think it was purely cynical. Like it is actually, to me, this is a very usable tarot deck. So I think it's well done in general.
Well, and I do think because this book, I didn't really look at the smaller book, but this book goes into like the whole genesis of how this deck was created. And I can tell it's sincere. I don't think it was necessarily like, oh, let's make a cash grab because of the, Pandemic Lovato or anything. It was, I don't get that sense at all.
No.
So I do think.
But I think both of those things can exist at the same time. They kind of made the decision to go with a tarot deck rather than oracle deck because they believed it would sell more, because ultimately they're a charity and their bottom line is they're trying to make as much money as possible, and then still have decided off the back of that to do as good a job as possible. And they decide, if we're going to make a tarot deck, let's at least do our absolute utmost to make it functional and work. Like, those two things are not mutually exclusive, I don't think.
That makes sense. Yeah, for sure. Shout out to Hester Prynne from the Scarlet Letter, because I was her for Halloween once. Like, and I will say, I understand the choice for this. I do understand the choice for this. And again, this boils down to how I tend to read cards, and so I think all of us have, very specific ways in which we kind of lean towards reading a card. And for my part, with this one, I understood the choice for sure. And also it left me wanting a little bit, in that for me, like the 10 of ink, 10 of wands is, yes, it's like it is, there is this burden element, but there is also a sense of, for me anyway, there is a sense of kind of reaching a certain goal or a level of completion of something within oneself, which I don't really get that from. I don't get that from Scarlet, or at least not. It's been a hot minute since I read it.
I guess. I mean, I suppose I would disagree with that. Like, I always think of the the wand suit obviously is about passion, right?
Mhm.
And like, and for Hester Prynne, I mean, in terms of keeping the secret of who was the father of her child, and like continuing to be in love with and protecting this identity of this person who was a father of her child, like there definitely is a protecting your passions and
I guess,
sort of
yeah, that's a great point.
you know, like, so there is, so to me, it's not just about the burden. It's also about the fact that Hester like completely comes into herself as a person, despite bearing this burden. She is making this choice to do what she's doing, you know, to protect and guard this secret, and to, you know, to devote her life to, you know, caring for this child and being this person, you know, despite the fact that everybody looks down on her. So I do think that
I think, yeah, no, now that you say it that way, that works. And I think that probably speaks to my problematic feelings about that characterization, given when it was written, you know.
I mean, I like it too. I think, like, just to add on to what Sarah said, I think another big part of the Ten of Wands for me is about taking on the full responsibility of things that aren't necessarily yours to take on.
Yeah.
And she absolutely does that. Like, she bears full responsibility for this child and this, you know, this affair that has happened. And whilst the father doesn't actually get off scot-free because of all the stuff that goes on in his mind and how it ultimately destroys him, for a large portion of the book, outwardly, she is the only person taking responsibility for something that she is not the only person that was involved in. So I think
absolutely, I do get that sense of taking on all the burden, all the responsibility. And I guess for me, what felt like a missing piece is like, okay, and then where, because ultimately at the end of, like, and again, it's been a really long time since I read this book, but for me, part of the frustration was feeling like, okay, this, I mean, and what is she getting from this? You know what I mean? She's protecting the dude, she's protecting, you know, and she's doing the right thing. Absolutely. And I suppose, and this is what matters to her. And this is okay, fine. And also I think it's probably just the way I'm interpreting it, in that I had problems with her characters. I just had problems with that book in general, even though I dressed up.
Oh, well, yeah, no, I know.
I mean, I DNF'd. I didn't even finish it. I looked up how it ended online because I got halfway through it and thought, I can't do this. I just can't. This book is miserable. I don't want to read books that make me miserable.
Oh my God. And they did like the worst movie rendition with, okay. Demi Moore was Hester Prynne. Gary Oldman was Dimsdale, I believe. And I don't remember who played Chillingsworth. But man, did they make that into like a hot sack of garbage? That one. I mean, it was just like, from what I remember, it was terrible. But anyway,
have you guys ever seen the movie?
Fantastic points. What's that?
Have you ever seen the movie Easy A?
Yes.
Yeah.
Because like what always cracks me up is obviously that story is like a sort of retelling of the Scarlet Letter. But also like there's the whole joke about like how everybody writes a paper about the Scarlet Letter and everybody talks about the scene where Demi Moore gets out of the bath. And so that's just what it always makes me think of.
Yes, it's terrible. But anyway. Yeah. All right. So yes, fantastic points. You're changing my mind. Anything else in the ink? So, okay, why don't we move on to the light suit, which is cups.
Yeah. And again, the vast majority of this worked for me. And also like I had never read Carmilla, which is apparently a lesbian vampire novel. And like, why have I never read that? So like, you know,
that one is on my TBR.
Yeah,
I do intend to read that one at some point.
Like, sweet. I saw this card and was like, dang. And then I looked up the book and I was like, okay, we'll read that one. So
and I think it also had some influence on Bram Stoker as well. Carmilla, I think, before he wrote Dracula. So.
Right, because it actually predates Dracula.
Yes,
which is awesome. I actually, again, I mean, we've got Carmilla for the ace, what we've got Emma for the 2, Wizard of Oz for the 3, Bartleby the Scrivener for the 4. The 5 is The Great Gatsby. The 6 is Tom Sawyer. The 7 is Midsummer Night's Dream. The 8 is Paradise Lost, which I think is actually really, really good for the 8 of Cups. Like the 9 is Anne of Green Gables. Like I loved almost all of these pairings. Like I think they're great, you know. Like, so I mean, it's so like the Tom Jones being the Knight of Cups.
That
like,
one I liked, yeah.
It's so perfect. Like that's a perfect pairing. So again, for the most part, I think that these are all like really, really well chosen. So that, I mean, that like, again, that's my opinion.
Yeah,
I think that, yes, I agree. I think for me, it was more just kind of the way maybe certain things were illustrated. Because once again, I'm looking at it from the lens of like, okay, if I didn't know this story, would I get the most from this image? Or would I have like for even the 2 of Light? So this is Emma. And like, it makes sense. The story makes sense. This image, I would have maybe drawn it differently. Because the focus is on her matchmaking. And the fact that she's shit at it, really. I mean, that's what this image conveys to me. She's a shit matchmaker, and then you've got like Knightley in the background, like looking. I mean, and so to me, it's kind of like I would have just kind of chosen a different way to render the 2 of Cups using Emma.
That's totally fair. That is totally fair.
And then me just being basic bitch. I love Wizard of Oz. I don't love that there's 4 characters for the 3.
Well.
Yeah, no, unless you're counting like Dorothy as the outlier and you've got like the 3, you know, whatever. But that's just me being basic.
Or you've got 3 people, haven't you? Because the at least the Tin Man and the Scarecrow look like people, whereas the Lion is not a person.
Yeah, I mean, we could do it that way, but
I could argue it that way. I'm stretching massively, but
or it's just Dorothy meets 3 companions, right? Like the 3 Musketeers is called the 3 Musketeers, even though there's 4 of them.
That's
like
true.
you know,
and that's where I'm.
But isn't it D'Artagnan and the 3 Musketeers though? Isn't that like
it's D'Artagnan and
different? D'Artagnan is not included as one of the 3 Musketeers.
Again,
not officially, but fundamentally, like it's the same thing with Dorothy. Like, is Dorothy one of the 3 companions that she meets in Oz? No, she is Dorothy. So
I'm just giving this deck a hard time. Like honestly, it's fine. I'm just being like
it's totally
it does work as a story.
I actually really like that card.
I like it as well. I really actually like the image.
Yeah,
but I'm like, there are 4 here.
Another one where I think, like, I do think that. So the Great Gatsby for the 5 of Cups is a fantastic choice.
Yes.
But I can see how the image
does not convey
the 5 of Cups necessarily, but it very well conveys the Great Gatsby, and it very well conveys, like, again, if you know the Great Gatsby, then this is a fantastic card, but the image maybe not specifically what you need.
Exactly. And so that was kind of my thing. And then, okay, I'm sorry, 6 of Light. So this is Tom Sawyer. Put your tongue back in your mouth. This image like really creeped me out. I'm not going to even lie. This image really legit creeped me out.
He's a boy slobbering over a pie. What is creeping you out about it, you weirdo?
Are you looking at his
slobbering over a pie?
Like, look at he looks maniacal with this pie. Anyway,
I mean, Tom Sawyer is kind of like.
Like,
Tom Sawyer, like, I mean, he's a mischief maker.
I know, but this isn't mischief. This is creepy.
It's a scam.
Yeah, I don't see that, Julie.
It's creepy. I will die on that hill. The 7 of Light is beautiful. Okay, so like the 9. Okay, the 9 of Light is quintessential Sarah card for many reasons. Like not just because. Hold on, glare, and also not just because this is Anne of Green Gables. Okay. But like her face is so, it gives me such Anna Kay. I cannot even like, honestly, I just like this has got to be one of Sarah's favorite cards for like, so.
Well, I mean, obviously, like it's
Anne of Green
Gables, and it's Anne getting her beautiful puff sleeve dress on Christmas morning as the 9 of Cups. Like, this is a perfect card, and I love it. So I mean, it's perfect. Like, yeah.
So So yeah, so
Adore it.
that's the light
Mhm.
or
How do
cup.
we all feel about Jane Eyre as the Queen of Light?
I hated it.
Oh,
But it's
really?
not supposed to be Jane Eyre, is it? It's supposed to be Mrs. Rochester, isn't it? Is in the card.
Oh, it's Jane.
I thought the
It's
woman
Jane
was
Eyre. Okay,
supposed to be
so
Richard.
No,
I know it's
I-
Jane Eyre, but I thought the woman was supposed to be
No,
Mrs.
she's holding a jug of water. It's Jane.
okay, I did not like this one. I forgot. Where are my notes? Did I? Okay, I did not really care for this one.
Okay.
Or just rather just the more than anything, like I understand what they were going for, and actually the connection that they were trying to make, I can buy. Like I'm for that. Like I don't mind that connection. I did not like this image. I hate this image, and the reason is what they're choosing to show is like, okay, I mean, I feel like they went with like, okay, where can we put in some fire and flames? Well, there was that scene where Mr. Rochester almost gets burned to death.
But she has a jug. She puts out the fire with water.
I know, but how is that queen? How is that queen of light? Like, I don't know. To me, so to me, when they're talking about they're talking about like in the guidebook how it's about like her emotions and that and the way that she comes back to Mr. Rochester by hearing like the voice and whatever and but then you give me this image which and again like, this is very subjective in that like this evokes a very different thing for me than the overall essence of Queen of Light.
Mm-hmm.
I think I would have wanted something. I don't know. This just doesn't work for me. This just does not work for me.
Okay.
I would have rather. I just would have rather something else because this is like one of those strong scenes in the book where it feels very. I just don't like it. I don't like it. Just gonna say that.
I guess I liked it. I thought it was like clever that it's a moment where where and again obviously there are so many criticisms of Jane Eyre and like yes we've all read Wide Sargasso Sea and everything
yes.
But I do kind of like this idea that they're like part of the chaos of what's happening. Like she is with her caring putting an end to some of the chaos of the situation. Like that to me really works. Like I wasn't sure about it, but then when I saw that she has the jug of water in her hand, like this is a scene where she actually puts out the fire, I was like, oh, okay, like that actually really works for me as a moment in Jane Eyre. Again, just because it incorporates water in a vessel and like whatever. But in any case, I liked it. So
yeah,
I have no strong feelings about it either way. Just saying. Like, one of you hates it, one of you loves it. I'm kind of meh.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't know.
I love Jane Eyre. It's one of my favorite stories.
I do too.
Ever. But and yes, I have read Wide Sargasso Sea as well.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't have any particular strong feelings either way.
And I think what gets me is that okay, so I think also it's the renaming thing again.
Okay.
Because like you're focusing on her with the jug of water because this is the cup suit. That makes sense. But the fact that it's called the Queen of Light, all I can see are the flames of the bed, right?
That's totally fair.
It just really, and again, just the nature of the scene, especially given early on the plot of the book. And again, I'm like totally projecting my particular subjective, views of this story into this card clearly. But it was even those elements in itself, the fact that this is cups, but all I can see are these huge flames. And yeah, this Mr. Rochester almost getting burned to a crisp. Yes, she does come and help save the day. It just didn't work for me. Even elemental wise, even like renaming wise of this food, I just don't like it.
That's fair.
Yeah. We can agree to just
yeah. Totally fine. As always.
But okay. I really actually appreciate your take on it, Sarah. That might help me like it a little more, hate it less.
I think it's really interesting how you have completely opposite views of this card, and both of you are focusing on completely different.
And that's the thing. That is,
and I think that's really fascinating to
Mhm.
watch that play out. It's like Julie's focus is all on the fire, and that makes this card really difficult for her. And Sarah sees the jug and the water, and that makes the card make perfect sense. And I think that's just a really fascinating and good illustration of just how tarot works in general.
Exactly.
How subjective our opinions can be on decks.
Yeah, yes, absolutely.
Exactly. And there's really no right or wrong. It's what we bring to the deck, what we bring to how we, read the cards. I mean, it's so, yeah.
And also, Julie, your point about how it is stupidly, again, in my opinion, called the Queen of Light, and how that mere fact makes you focus on the flames.
Yes.
Yeah.
That makes perfect sense. Like, yes, this should have been the Queen of Ink, 100%. Like,
they're freaking big. They're just there. They're just that's all I see. I
totally get that. I totally get that. Yeah.
So, I don't know. Yeah, and I just feel like with the Queen of Light, well, cups particularly, cups for me, the Queen, there is this feeling of more of like softness and receptivity and such, and this scene just in general, even if we're isolating it to the way it's depicted, this to me feels not almost even a little ironically kind of cold.
Oh, okay. Yeah, interesting. Okay.
Like it doesn't feel like she's
like action queen.
It just doesn't feel I mean, and the love story is just so, it's like, it's one of the most, now love story, and I don't, anyway, whatever. I'm totally harping on because I like this novel so much, and I have some history. Like I just, I just would have done it differently. That's all. I'm not saying Queen of Light is a bad choice. Like this story, I'm not saying that. I just don't like the way it's depicted.
Totally fair.
Definitely don't like how it's called light, the cup suit.
Yeah, that's gonna drive me crazy because the swap was so obvious to me.
Yeah,
it's so obvious how they should have paired it up to me, like in my mind, that it's that aspect of the deck is like one of my least favorite things about the deck, and it's going to bother me probably a little bit forever about this deck, because it's like, oh my god, you guys missed such an obvious opportunity to like make a connection that is like it's on every level. It makes no sense.
It's, no deck is perfect, but
exactly.
All right, so the quills, which is the swords.
I love most of these.
Yeah, I think this suit is probably my favorite of the deck. I think it's just a really well done, and even the ones where I don't really know the story as well, I'm like, I totally get from the image how that works, and I imagine if I looked up the story, I would just add to it.
The yellow wallpaper as the 8 of Swords is like one of my favorite pairings.
It's one of my favorites.
Love this one.
I
love Macbeth as the 9. Like I love Sherlock Holmes as the 8 ace. Antigone as the 2. Like pretty much everything in this one makes a lot of sense to me, except the 6. I hate the 6.
Really did not care for the 6.
What the hell? Like
I think they were reaching for this one. Yeah, they were really reaching. If you think about the plot of the story, like the transfer, no.
No, I know. Well, and it's like, everything about that just.
So this is Six of Quills is the Metamorphosis by Kafka.
Yeah,
this is the one where he turns into.
So are you saying that in dying he moved on to a better life? Like I don't get this. Like, okay, transforming into a cockroach, his life obviously did not become better. No. Or it wasn't in a way it was a moving on from him feeling like he was in the position where he was required to provide for his family and stuff, but like it's not like things got better for him after he became a monstrous vermin. Like that's not that's not the point of the story. So are you saying when he died that was the point of like
exactly
but does the 6 of Swords say that in anywhere in the normal reading that moving on is going to make your life better? Or does it just say that you're moving on? Like when I read the 6 of Swords, I don't necessarily go that far. Like if I look at the 6 of Swords, it's a leaving behind like your difficulties and your challenges and you're not really, because they're, you know, in the traditional, they're still in the boat, so you're still kind of actually taking them with you. But there's nothing in the Six of Swords that suggests to me that you're necessarily moving on to anything better. You might think you are, but until you actually get out of the boat, you don't know. And in order to know whether it's better or worse, you need to look at what else is around you in that reading.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I agree with that, actually, because I don't necessarily read Six of Swords as there being like this definite kind of like improvement of situation, but more of the agency of choosing to, like, this thing has happened and now we are at least mindset of making this move to transition to at least the idea of something better, whether you reach that or not. And I don't get that from Kafka. I do not get that from, like, there is no agency here in the fact that he turns into a cockroach. And I think they were trying to twist it as like, well, he's focusing on moving on after great loss. So that's the whole idea of the Six of Quills, right? Focusing on moving on after great loss or disappointment seemed like a fit for Gregor after losing his body, his purpose, his family, and his life. Like, no.
Yeah, exactly.
No, that's not
that was
how
my
I
issue
read
with it too. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So yes, choppy waters to smooth waters. Yeah. So
I do think that there is a, you know, I do tend to read something better, at least
in mindset, the
hope of something better as being embodied in the Six of Swords. But even still, I don't see, like you said, Julie, I don't see that in this card at all. Like,
it's not in the story. Like, that's not how I remember the story.
Right.
So again, they were reaching.
I do not like that card. Also, I have never read, this is one of the Poe short stories I've never read. So I don't even know the plot line of this. This is The Black Cat by Poe.
No, I don't know it either. No.
I read it like ages ago and I don't remember much of it, but actually based on, if I'm going by the guidebook, right, and the very little they give, it makes sense. I mean, it makes sense. You know, there's just the kind of, if we're going shadowy, like all like, you know, deceit and trickery and like, you know, strategizing to kill the wife and the cat or whatever. So yeah, but I think that, you know, the yellow wallpaper certainly worked. And again, this is like one of those things that I feel like I really do. Don't get me wrong. I like this choice. I do like this choice. It makes sense. I love the way that the image is rendered, etc. But again, I guess I think I'm putting my own lens into it of having read the story and, you know, kind of my own personal interpretation of, you know, this story goes just beyond her own mental illness, but the outside influences that exacerbate her and I think that's kind of a lost nuance when just putting it into the frame of the Eight of Swords, because so much of it was not just about the fact that she is experiencing mental ill health, but the way that it is being treated, the way that society, her husband, the doctors are trying to treat mental ill health, actually exacerbates the situation and is also a huge factor in how she becomes like this.
Right. I definitely see what you're saying. I mean, because yes, absolutely. That like the critique of the story is that, you know, the way society treats women is what is creating this issue where she feels trapped because you know, because and it is those outside influences. That said, I don't necessarily see that as like mutually exclusive with the Eight of Swords at all, because you know, all of our self-limiting beliefs are going to come from somewhere, right? Like,
sure. And so, like, that's what I'm saying. Like, I don't think this was a terrible choice. I don't think of it as at all. I do think it's. I just kind of see it as like, again, when I'm looking at the broader scope of the story, which I can't help but do, that this is just a slice of the larger story.
That's a full nuance.
So, but I really, this was one of my favorites of the whole deck, actually. Eight of Quill Swords.
I also really love Macbeth as the 9. Like,
I really love Macbeth as the 9 as well.
That's super good. So generally speaking, I thought that this was well, I will say that the Queen of Swords I mean, as Grendel's mother, like, okay.
No, I don't.
I feel like, again, it was a situation where they wanted to pair a story with a card, and they were like, oh, sure, we'll make Grendel's mother the Queen of Swords because she's a monster, right? And Queen of Swords, they don't have any feelings. It like, I just like, I don't know. It that one felt very like, again, it felt kind of lazy, I feel like. So that said, I haven't read Beowulf in a long time, so I
haven't read Beowulf in a really long
I haven't read Beowulf. I've seen the film, I think. I don't remember enjoying so with Angelina Jolie, that one.
Oh.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. I remember that Angelina Jolie was involved in.
Yeah. She was, in fact, Grendel's mother, I think.
Okay.
Okay. That's a take on Grendel's mother for sure. Yeah. It's interesting. I haven't seen it, but that's really interesting.
I think it's been a while since I've seen it, so I may be mixing her up, but I'm sure that's what she was.
So Laura is saying, I like that this. Oh God, I don't have my glasses. Where are my glasses? Can somebody read?
I like that this 6. It's very obvious what story it is. Some stories I have read, I did not recognize.
Yeah, that's true. Yes. That is true. That was very. I was like, okay, Kafka for sure. Yeah,
exactly.
And I haven't actually read Metamorphosis, but immediately knew that's what it was.
Yes,
right.
Exactly.
Because even if you haven't read it, we've all heard of the story, Kafka's story, where a man turns into a cockroach. Like,
right? Exactly. I also really loved the Knight of Swords as being Oedipus. That I thought.
Yes, I think that was very appropriate for sure.
Very well chosen.
I also think the King of Swords is perfect.
Yes, it's
for this one as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So,
let's see, who was Queen of Swords or King of Swords?
It's Marcus Aurelius.
Yeah,
really good. That's really So cool.
All right, last suit, Parchment or the Pentacles.
We've all talked already about how much we hate the page, so we can
skip over that one.
Anyone coming in late, we talked about how we hate the page of Pentacles or Parchment because they chose Romeo and Juliet, which makes sense of that, if you will. You can't, because it doesn't make sense. So that's all you need to know.
I'm not sure I necessarily understand the knight either, though. Like, I don't know the story, but when I
don't know the story,
I'm like, this does not have Knight of Pentacle vibes for me.
This is The Princess of Mars by Edgar Rice Burroughs. Right. I do not know the story, so I cannot speak to this image.
I think it's one of those ones where, like, I am only familiar with it insofar as, like the movie John Carter and stuff like that.
Which I've seen. Yep.
So I mean, I suppose if you've like read that story and like, yes, you have a strong connection to that character of John Carter, and you do think of him as having a Knight of Pentacles personality, then sure. But again, I don't have that level of connection to that story where I feel that way. So it's sort of like, okay, sure. Yeah, whatever. Like it's just, not one that feels very on point to me, I guess, just because I don't know, I've never read that book, and I don't know the character that well. So
another one, again, I'm going off image. The Phantom of the Opera. For 8 of Pentacles or Parchment. I get what they were going for.
Yeah.
With the whole idea of is it Christine?
Yes, Christine.
Mastering her singing, and the Phantom dude taking her on, etc. But the image to me is very 7 of Swords, in my opinion. This to me feels very kind of 7 of Swords to me, like just kind of looking at it. And if general Phantom of the Opera, like and the puppeteer strings, and it feels not.
I also don't like. I just also don't get the like. Christine didn't become the lead singer because she worked really hard. She became the lead singer because the Phantom threatened
in love with her. Yeah, that's true.
And they were frightened of him. Like it doesn't, like it just doesn't have that. Like the guidebook talks about working to perfect your skill and all that kind of stuff. And I'm like, I don't get that from the Phantom of the Opera with Christine. So that's not really what happens.
So I'll read you the larger It says the 8 of parchment is about apprenticeship and passion for a task, and in reverse, how that passion can corrupt. We told Dan. So Dan, how do you say his last name? Shan?
I don't know.
Whatever. Sorry, Dan. So Dan is the one that chose this story. So Eric is happy to while away his life hiding in the, oh God, how do you say that in French? Palais Garnier. Spying on the patrons and performers and occasionally doing evil. But when Christine arrives, he becomes her tutor, which fills his life with meaning and eventually a love that's so strong it's worth killing to keep her, and then letting her go to keep her, and ultimately worth dying for. So yeah, so I think they're playing on the whole like apprenticeship, like sure. And again, like
it's a really loose connection,
right? I wouldn't be
yeah.
I wouldn't be mad at it if they illustrated it better.
Yeah.
Well, and again though, like it's another one where it's like I'm guessing this dude wanted to pick the Phantom of the Opera for something, and so they like tried to make a connection. Yes. Whereas if you start with the concept of the 8 of Pentacles and go from there, you might wind up with a better choice. You know, there are definitely other stories that are about apprenticeship or about learning at a task, or I mean, there's better choices there.
I don't hate it. I just
exactly.
I don't love it either. I don't think it's the best choice for that.
Sure.
The 7 also, like the Lost World, that was another one where it was like, okay, somebody wanted to pick this, so they made like a very loose, like okay, they go on this expedition and then good, you know, ultimately they get some riches as a result of it, like sure, but like this story really, like of all the stories you could have picked this, okay, you know, it just was not a it, you know, I just there were so many better choices, right?
For sure.
But the 6 of Pentacles as Les Mis is perfect.
It is.
So good. That is a perfect choice. So yeah, I really love that one actually. The vast majority of this suit, again, I was not a big fan of the 7 or the 8. I'm not familiar with the 9. The Page was, you know, there are a lot of good choices in this suit, but there are also some that I'm just like, you know.
I remember we talked a little bit like offline about the Queen of Parchment, the Snow Queen. Did you change your mind about how you felt after sitting with it or reading the guide? Because at first you were saying that it made sense to you given the main protagonist being the Queen of Pentacles, but really the focus of this is the Snow Queen.
And when I read the like. So I don't like the connection that they made where they make the Snow Queen herself Queen of Pentacles, because like, yes, she lives in this sort of world of like implied luxury, but she's completely cold-hearted, which is not the Queen of Pentacles like that. Like, so I didn't like that aspect of it. But that said, the rest of the story of the Snow Queen, there are multiple female multiple female characters, as well as the main protagonist of the story, who I do think embody the Queen of Pentacles much better. Like as Gerda goes on this journey, she's invited into other people's homes and she's cared for, and they're all women. Like almost all of those characters are women. And so like it's fine. Like I can make sense of it as long as I'm thinking of different characters in the story than the one that's depicted on the card. Like, you know, so yeah, that one I have a lot of thoughts about, but I'll make it work. I'll make it work. But I think that they did not understand the Queen of Pentacles very well in terms of making this choice. So
hello, pick a card from Greece, I'm assuming. Super excited to get the deck, but no, where are my glasses? It won't do it for me. A big part of it was beyond the questionable associations. I like my story from tarot to be open to change. A novel, a novel has a definite ending.
Yeah. And I think that is the risk on the other side, isn't it? Which is always the risk with the theme deck, is that if you know the stories too well, then there is that risk of getting stuck in a very specific box with each card, because you then are making like almost 2 lots of associations to box you in, which is always a risk with theme decks.
And that's one of my big issues. And clearly, as I demonstrated, what I myself was doing with some of these cards, where it's like I have a personal connection or feelings about certain characterizations or stories or plot points, and so that's going to really color the way, and not necessarily for the benefit of a reading. A tarot reading, So in that sense, I feel like this deck is ultimately not going to work for me. It's a beautiful deck. I think that there are ways in which, like Sarah, you're saying that it's a usable deck for you, and like you loved overall the choices, and so it's a very individual experience. So for my part, that is very much the thing. Like I don't know enough of the stories. A lot of the images don't do it for me, just in terms of being able to use them in and of themselves if I don't know the stories. And then some of the stories that I do know that I have very personal feelings about they can work, but sometimes it does kind of narrow my gaze. So
I will say though, on a completely unstory related note, from a cardstock perspective, the gilding, for anybody who has it and hasn't worked with it yet because of the gilding and the fact that it comes all stuck together and meh. Once you work with it and you start shuffling it, it actually works really well.
Yeah.
I think you have to riffle shuffle it.
You have to
hand shuffle it. It's not going to do what you need to break the gilding so that it stops clumping together. But if you work with it and you riffle it enough, it very quickly becomes a nice, usable, shuffleable.
I agree. And if you have smaller hands, you're gonna have to break them into smaller batches. But that's essentially what I did. I broke them into smaller batches and then riffle shuffled the smaller batches, and I felt like it started to break in pretty nice when I did that. And there's
to pictures though. It takes shit pictures. Like the gold foiling and all of that is beautiful, but it takes terrible pictures.
Yeah. I mean, that's the nature of the shiny.
Yeah.
I mean, in person, it's really nice.
And you know what? Ultimately, for me, I think this is my thing, and this is just my thing in general, is that I wish not just the list, Brink, but anybody who makes a tarot deck on Kickstarter or indie decks is stop spending all of your time and your money on building and complicated gold foiling and stupidly thick cardstock and blah blah blah, and put that time and that money into making a guidebook that is usable and valid and adds depth to your deck. I don't care about the crap. I want a deck that works and has a guidebook that works.
And in the guidebook itself, if you go to the back, they did have a list of tarot consultants or something like that, and or maybe it was the front, tarot advisors, and I don't really know what that means.
I think they talked about it in the comments, but Rachel Pollock.
Rachel Pollock was one, and then
one of the authors who picked a card.
She picked a card, but was a tarot advisor. Did she? I'm just wondering, did they after they made the whole deck, right? Or as they were going through, who did they consult to be like, yeah, okay, as someone who uses tarot, as someone who is more experienced with tarot, just outside of literature, does this guidebook make sense, to help augment the deck? Does this, you know what I mean? Because
I think back to Sarah's point of what she was saying earlier, they've obviously either spent some time understanding the tarot, somebody has, or they have definitely worked with people who understand the tarot, because for someone like Sarah who's read a vast majority of these stories, they make sense in such a way that there must have been a discussion about this is what the tarot means, we need to make this work. Otherwise, you would have just ended up with 78 images that have no connections. Or law of averages, you'd end up with one or two cards that worked perfectly and the rest of the deck would be shit
garbage. Yeah, for sure.
No, I think it's definitely the editors, the tarot consultants who were working on this deck knew enough about tarot to, in the vast majority of cases, make a quality suggestion to each author as to what card a particular story should be paired with. Like, I think that they did actually a good job of that about 90%, well, maybe 80% of the time that they did that. I do wonder with this deck, you know, with all of the gilding and the shininess and everything, and how many people backed this deck. Like, there are probably a lot of people out there who, because of the authors involved and because of the, you know, the type of deck it is, they bought it as like a collection piece as opposed to a usable tarot deck.
Yeah.
I'm guessing that for a lot of people, they're like, oh, cool, you know, all these cool authors that we know, because a lot that is also the case. Like, a lot of the authors who are involved in this project are very well-known authors who are very popular. And so, you know, I think that there are quite a large number of people who bought this deck like as a collectible as opposed to as a
usable deck.
So, which at that point, then it's sort of like, okay, yeah, I get why they did all the gilding and the foiling and the blah, 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 blah. But I do think that more effort could have been made into making it a usable deck with a quality guidebook for the actual tarot community. I just don't know that that was what their goal necessarily was.
True. Yeah.
Yeah.
Talking about the authors involved, interestingly, I have actually, although I know a lot of them, I have actually only read 10 of them. I thought it would be more, but there's loads of names that I'm like, I recognize that person, but I've never read any of their work.
I didn't count. I did not go through.
I did a very quick skim, and I think it's like a handful, like on one hand, of authors that I might have read or at the very least recognized their names.
I mean, recognizing their names, I have a lot more than 10, but ones that I've actually read something that they've written, there's only 10. But there is, I said, there's a lot more that I know who they are, and I could probably tell you the name of at least one of their books, but I just haven't read them.
Yeah. I think it was
fun. And I did actually count Rachel Pollack, but I feel like I was kind of cheating when I counted Rachel Pollack because I've read her tarot books. I've never read any of her like graphic novels or anything. That
I've never read anything by her.
I've only ever read her tarot books also.
So I'm not sure she really counts.
Well, I will say that there, like, some of the authors that are involved in this deck, you know, are authors like Kelly Link, for example. I love seeing Kelly Link's name crop up anywhere. Like, there were quite a few authors in this deck where I was like, yes, this is, you know, these are people where, you know, I trust their, I trust that they're interested in good stories, you know, where like they're good authors who put some thought into why they wanted to pick a particular story. You know? So, so it was, on the whole, I think that there were there are good people involved in this.
I don't think it was, I mean,
I just wish they had gone about it a slightly, I think, come at the author with a theme and say, what's your favorite book on this theme? You know,
and you can, and I think you can see that, like, the author picked books that they enjoy. You can see that because there are like some of the choices that I know, like Stephen Fry. It does not surprise me in this that he picked the Iliad. Like, that is
right.
It just, of course he did. Exactly. You know, and there's a lot of cases like that with the authors that I know. I'm like, yeah, I totally get why you would pick that story. As having read your work, I know why that would be the kind of book that you would pick.
No, I think what this deck has going for, I mean, with the guidebook, if anything, shows that the people were so enthusiastic about this project. There's no doubt about that. There was genuine and sincere enthusiasm about the project and about, the effort to do the best job that they could, and loving the stories, you know, and wanting to use the stories that meant a lot to them and such. And so I respect that. I appreciate that, you know. So in that way, like this deck, you know, because some decks can feel dirty, you know. It's like, clearly they were cash grabs. Clearly, I don't necessarily get that sense from this deck or the creators. I think it felt like a genuine deck.
And I mean, ultimately, it was a charity. It was for you know, the money went to literacy. It was
exactly, and you know, and I know there were a lot of hiccups and people upset about how the whole like process went down, and And I think also, I think people were able to just buy them the deck at a store before backers were even receiving their copies, which is a bit problematic. And with all that, I think that it sounds like they tried their best, and they truly were enthusiastic about this project.
I think they underestimated on a little bit how taking tarot, which at the moment is hugely popular, and some very well-known, very popular authors, and combining those together, I think they underestimated how big a deal that would be, and how many people would be like, I have to have this deck. I think that they were just not, like, right up until shipping, they were amazing. They were absolutely amazing. They were very good at updates. They ran a really great campaign. It all kind of fell apart around the shipping costs and stuff. But I also think they were just overwhelmed at the size of the project, and they didn't realize it would be that big. And I don't think they were ready for it to be that big.
Yeah.
Totally agree.
So those are our thoughts on the literary tarot, y'all.
Never in 41 minutes later.
Hopefully we didn't.
I mean, what might be fun is, like, maybe not, it might be a shit show that ends up being a lot of DNFing, but I was thinking what might be fun with this deck is to use it to pick books to read, like just for like a challenge. I'm going to pick a card, and whatever, as long as it's one I haven't read before, I'm going to have a go at reading that book and see how that goes.
Fun enough, I thought the same thing, but not in terms of like the book or the story depicted, but the contemporary author who chose that story. Because
you could do both.
Or both. But because I'm just like, I really, man.
Funny enough, Laura's just said exactly the same as you, that's what she wants to do.
Actually, the contemporary authors.
Well, and one of the things that was fun for me is that of the cards where I was not at all familiar with the source material, the vast majority of those were short stories for me, like which makes it like I was sort of like,
for you to
there's like a couple novels here, but most of them are short stories. So like I could read those, like I have time to read those. So I felt like it would be fairly easy for me to be pretty well acquainted with pretty much all the source material in the deck, which I think is one of the things that makes it usable for me. Is that I felt like, okay, of the works here that I don't know well enough to make sense of, I could probably read most of them pretty quickly. So that was cool.
So I've only read, either read or I'm familiar with enough that I've seen a film, or I've whatever, 29, and I'm not sure that I would want to read all of the other ones that I haven't read. I tend to try classics, and I DNF them really, really quickly. I them really, really quickly, because I just am a DNFer. That's what I do. If I don't like a book and it doesn't grab me in the first 80 to 100 pages, I put it down.
Same.
And I do that a lot with classics, I find.
And I agree with Laura. Like a lot of the classics, it was a requirement to read them in school or college, or it was a requirement for me to teach it. Which, man, now looking back, it's like, did I do a good job in teaching that thing? If I really didn't, I don't even remember if I even read it myself now, but I'm, it's like when you're forced to be with it. Okay, so Pick a Card is asking, I might have missed it because I was late. Sorry. Did you also think it has a negative slant on many cards that are traditionally more positive or less negative? Ace of Cups, Strength, etc. Yeah, I do. I do think that for several of the cards, and again, because it wouldn't have been my ideal choice of imagery per se, or so like. There's a Strength. So that was one I know that, Sarah and Heather loved, and I get it. I liked it. And again, to me, it definitely had a darker slant to it.
Yeah, definitely. I think Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde is just by its very nature quite a dark story. Yeah. So but I think it really works for a Strength card. But yes, I definitely think it leads to a more like controlling it leans much heavier into that controlling the beast within type reading than some other strength cards.
Well, and it doesn't have a happy ending, does it? Like,
it doesn't have,
in order to control the beast within, he has to commit
to die. Yeah, exactly. So
yes,
yeah, I think I do, and I think like again, the Ace of Cups is another great example, because Camilla, as you know, it's the story that inspired Dracula. It's, you know, it's lesbian vampires. It all sounds very fun, but it's like the danger of that. Like this young woman falls in love with a woman who is a vampire and ultimately wants to destroy her.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
So I think more often than not, it feels a little more. I feel like maybe I see more instances of there being like a heavier, more somber slant on a card than the depiction being like a lighter version of the card, like a
But aren't classics just a bit like that in general?
What's that?
Aren't classics just a bit like that in general? For the most part, they're a much heavier, darker, more morose. Oh my God, what the hell did I just read? Now I need to go and lie down for 4 hours.
There are like 3 Austen novels in here. There are 2 Ella Montgomery books. Like there are.
I mean, Jane Austen makes me want to lie down until she goes away.
Well, but they all have happy ending. I mean, like that's
Well, I'm just talking about some of the ones where. I don't even know what I'm talking about. Never mind. Scratch it. I lost it. It's gone.
Yeah.
What makes a classic a classic? There's the question.
You're in the old boys club and you were like born in 1800s. I'm just totally kidding. I don't know. It is subjective, isn't it?
In the case of this deck, in a lot of ways, because copyright was very much at issue. Like there was definitely like only a specific time period that they could draw on in terms of like, you know, you could make a deck of more modern works, but you have to get permission.
You have to get permissions. Exactly.
Exactly. That definitely simplified things for them. Right. And that is always going to be the drawback of having that limitation, is that you're going to be restricted to works of a particular vintage of, you know, where society was perhaps less enlightened about a lot of things. So
these all in the public domain?
Would make sense to Laura's comment earlier about how there's not very many there's very few like international stories. A large proportion of the stories are Western stories, and that may then be down to the difference in copyright laws.
Right. Well, and I think too, like at the point that they're shipping this deck all over the world, at the point that you have to think about not just like every country has different copyright laws, right? Like, so, you know, so the point that like people from all over the world are ordering this deck, like you have to take the most restrictive view of copyright in order to avoid getting in any trouble anywhere. So, you know, so I think it's that definitely was a restriction for them. And, you know, I think they did their best within those parameters for sure. So,
that would make sense actually, that the translations of stories are copyrighted.
Exactly.
No translation of stories are
Yeah.
I didn't even think about.
That would make total sense. I didn't even think of that.
Wow.
Yeah.
A lot of pieces that they probably, you know, again, a campaign of this that became of this magnitude must have been something difficult to navigate for sure.
You know, I think on the whole, though, even given the shipping drama and, you know, just like the world situation that made this drag on for much longer than it probably would have done otherwise, I think they did a good job considering the size of the project that they just hadn't anticipated. I think they've done a good job.
I mean, I like, as I've mentioned, I really like the deck. Like, I do think that being familiar, like they did make it almost completely unusable with the poor choices in what they did with the guidebooks, unless you are extremely familiar with the vast majority of the works. It would be very difficult to use. And I think that that's a big drawback to the deck. Again, I don't necessarily think that they were fully thinking about the tarot community and people who would be actually using the deck in terms of
No.
But within those parameters, within those limitations, I think it's on the whole a very good deck. I think that a lot of the pairings to me are really well chosen and bring out some nuances in the cards that are are important and not necessarily just surface level. And so I agree that it was really good. Shipping was a shit show, sure, but I like the deck a lot and I'm going to use it. So
how do you intend on using it, Sarah, if you don't mind my asking?
Just read with.
I mean, as in, like, would you do daily draws? Like, are you thinking just like a very kind of like, it's not necessarily like you have it in mind, like, oh, there are certain types of readings I want to, that this would be great for. I'm just going to use it if I want to use it.
I think it's just going to be, I'm going to use it if I want to use it. I probably will start doing some daily draws with it just because that's always a really good way to,
get to know a deck. Yeah.
Really get to know a deck.
Yeah.
So I think that makes a ton of sense. But again, to me, this deck really works for me, and so I'm excited to just use it in whatever way that I end up using any tarot deck. Like themed decks, sometimes you just feel like reading with one. Sometimes I just reach for my Game of Thrones tarot because I just feel kind of Game of Thronesy that day. This is going to be one of those, I think, just similar kinds of situations where I just reach for it because I feel like it. So, yeah.
And then Heather, you haven't decided yet whether you're going to ultimately keep the deck or not. Is that what you said in the beginning? Like, you're not sure?
Yeah, pretty much. I just like, for me, it's about making that decision of do I want to keep it as basically a
collection,
as an RWS that just has slightly different imagery and just read it as a regular RWS, or do I want to put in the work to understand the deck better, or do I just, am I at the point where I'm like, over half of this deck currently doesn't work for me, and that's actually a lot bigger than I'm willing to accept in a deck? I don't know. Basically, I'm a Libran, and anytime I have to make any kind of decision, I panic. So I don't know the answer to that question.
Yeah, I hear you.
What about you, Julie?
I don't know that I would reach for this deck, quite frankly, to use. I mean, but I will say, like earlier, I'd mentioned I did do my lunar spread and was pleasantly surprised at how, like, it was a great reading. So it's not off the table. I just feel like the whole idea of, is this, I mean, am I ever gonna be in the mood to use this deck? I'm not sure. As opposed to wanting to reach for something else, I'm more likely gonna probably want to reach for something else. And but this is a beautiful deck. So it's more about, like, do I keep this as more of like a collector's, because, like, a collector's item, because the art is beautiful. The production quality is on the whole beautiful. I, again, appreciate the effort that went into it and the sincere, kind of genuine feeling that went into the deck, so there is that, so at the very least, I don't know that I will use the deck really much, if at all, probably not at all, but maybe we'll still keep it just because it's so pretty. And I am an English major after all. You wouldn't know it after, like, today's
I mean, you would know it. But just from this conversation, you would know it. Just listening to the way that you talk about books, you would definitely know that you are an English major and that you have taught English literature. Just
so much.
You talk about literature.
My self-esteem was beat with this deck. No, I'm just kidding. Not really, but yes, a little bit. Thanks.
No, you do. You talk about books like somebody who has studied literature. You genuinely do.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Well, I think we shall wrap up now if we don't have any other questions or any other comments on specific cards or anything.
I just want to know, Laura, have you used this deck yet? And
yeah,
will you be using it, or will you be keeping it?
Yeah,
because Laura's the only other person I know who's definitely got it.
Yes.
If she's
she did a video talking about it when she first got it.
Yeah. Well, this is interesting to me because she mentions going through the cards with no guidebook, whether or not you were able to accurately identify the cards. And I will admit, I never did that. I did not go through the deck without the guidebook the first time.
Me neither.
Oh, really?
I mean, there were, like, as I was going through the deck, I had the guidebook with me, and there were, like, certain cards, like the Knight of Cups would be a really good example of that, where I looked at the card and I was like, okay, I can't immediately tell what this is, but I bet you $10 it's Tom Jones. And then I looked at the guidebook and sure enough, that's what it was, so that like there were definitely cards where it's like, okay, sure. Like, it's not immediately obvious, like, what couple from literature this is, or like what character, because not every story has some specific object or setting or something that's so clear what it actually is that you can necessarily identify it without knowing what was intended, you know. So you know, I will say that yeah, I do think that, like, unless you at the very least look at the guidebook and say, okay, let me just make sure I know for sure what work of literature they're referencing here. Yeah, I feel like you do have to do that.
Yeah, because I did try what Laura tried, which is to like just kind of go through the concept, like, would I know this just by looking at it? And there were definitely ones where I'm like, like, for instance, Room with a View, I would not have, just by looking at, you know, Room with a View, I wouldn't have gotten that. The Scarlet Pumpernickel, just because I never read Pumpernickel. What did I say?
You know what I was saying about you sounding like an English literature major? I take it back.
Scarlet Pumpernickel. That's what Pickernell? Wait, what's it called? What's it called?
Scarlet Pimpernel.
Pimpernel. What have I been calling it? Oh my God.
Scarlet Pumpernickel. It was fantastic. It's okay. It was just.
Well, in any case, clearly I haven't read this. Yeah. Just like, yeah, things like that, or even like Eight of Ink. This being what Leaves of Grass, I believe. Like, I would never have.
Yeah.
You know. Yeah. So there were definitely.
Sure.
Prefer blondes.
Yeah. No. Definitely. I mean, that's absolutely.
Yeah.
And I guess I was willing to give it a little bit more of a pass on that, because I do think that with most works of literature, like, it's not going to be like, it's not easy to depict a couple and have somebody be able to say, oh, for sure that's Emma and Knightley, you know, like, you know, like, how do you make that so obvious that you can tell without knowing what? One thing that I wish is they had actually put the titles.
That's what I was thinking as well.
Yes, it's been very helpful.
That would have been one thing. I agree.
Yes,
I agree. I totally agree. That would have made
that 100%. That is my one thing. If I could only change one thing about this deck, that would probably be it. Put the freaking titles of the books on the cards.
If I could change two things, it would be swap those two damn suits. On the cards, and then
the third thing, the guidebook. Okay, so if I could change,
So there's three things that we would change.
Three major things that I would change. Have a synopsis of the book in the guidebook. Put the names of the books on the card and swap around inks and light, please. Done. Perfect deck.
Fair enough. Early ritual for sure. Yes. Oh, thank you for coming, Reese. Thank you all for coming. For everyone watching the playback, I think we did cover everybody's comments, or I think
so. I think there's just a couple of people saying like what they're going to do with it, whether they've got the deck or not, whether they're going to. Like Laura has been shuffling it aggressively. It's not that bad, Laura.
I think we'll keep it. Lost a lot. Use it sporadically. I could use it for more story related. Oh yeah. Like making D&D character back. That's fantastic. Yeah. I mean, I'm honestly not
opposed to like. Also,
sorry.
Pick a Card also has this deck and is going to keep it but not use it.
Okay. Yeah, it's more of like a collector thing. If by any reason I feel like I would want to use this in the future, I wouldn't even be opposed to just like, okay, screw the guidebook. I'm just gonna like make up my own stories about what I don't remember what this image is, and I'm just gonna make my own shit up, and that's fine because I can do it.
Yeah, that is an option. I think I'm going to keep it. I think Laura might have said this as well. Actually, this might be where I saw it, but like. By the time you factor in the cost of the deck and the shipping and everything else, this deck cost me a shit ton of money.
Yeah.
And I can't afford to just give it away. I need to get my money's worth out of it because it actually ended up being fairly expensive.
Yes, it is. This definitely was a costly deck for sure, and that's another thing.
Realistically, I need to, even if I keep it as a collectible and never use it again, I need to see it on my shelf so I can justify the amount of money I spent on it. I mean, to be fair, the shipping to the UK wasn't actually that bad in the end. My shipping wasn't high, but
and this was a gift for me. So if I were to decide that I don't want to keep it for whatever reason, I would go back to the person. I'd be like, Tina, do you want this back? Because I know that this was freaking expensive. So if you want this back, I'd be happy to send it back your way. But
I'm kind of like that with all indie decks. Like that's not specifically, just to clarify, specifically about this deck, but just being in the UK and getting any deck on Kickstarter at this point is really expensive. So if I'm going to buy an indie deck from Kickstarter, then I'm kind of accepting the fact that I'm going to have to keep it until I die.
Yeah.
My like I was going to say my children, but I'm not planning on having any. But somebody will then also need to keep
will inherit it. Yeah,
they die.
Oh my God. Okay.
Yeah, no, and this actually is true because like when I first got my shipping bill, it was $25 was the initial estimate for shipping to me in the US, which again, like, I mean, it's not like the end of the world or anything, but knowing that they were shipping something within the US and you can literally ship like a priority mail flat rate less than that,
right?
All of this shit would have fit into,
right?
That made me mad. But then when I got the revised shipping estimate, I think it was like $18.
Oh, okay.
I was like, yeah, that's
that works. That's better.
That's not that bad. Like I can live with that. So
yeah, because I think it was also Laura that said that it was because they were using Easy Ship, which has been just sounds like a problem across the board with deck creators having wanted to use Easy Ship. Like it's just.
But I think isn't there something to do with Kickstarter and Easy Ship where they've partnered up and it makes it a lot harder for them to use someone else now because of contracts between Kickstarter and Easy Ship. I think is my understanding, but it could be completely wrong.
No, you're correct. That's absolutely correct. Yeah.
Wow.
So, and there's another deck that I've backed that is currently in shipping limbo hell because of Easy Ship shipping costs.
Oh, yikes.
Absolutely exorbitant. So, so yeah, it's like, you know, I understand why backers are now charging shipping later, because, you know, with things in the world the way they are in the pandemic, shipping costs have gone up and there's been issues. However, if you're going to use Easy Ship, like you need to like have a discussion with Easy Ship about, because they charge like I think for this deck, they were saying that Easy Ship was going to charge them $8 per order to pack the deck. Like that's crazy. $8 to put everything in a box. That's a little bit out of control. Like, I'm sorry, you know, like, so yeah, anyway.
Totally agree. Totally agree. Okay. So on that note, shall we wrap up? Thank you once again to everyone. This was a lot of fun. Hopefully you all thought so too and got some different perspectives on just the deck in general, the different cards and the stories.
I think this is the first time we've talked about a deck where we've all felt very differently.
Just yes. So we got a question here from Reese. Heather, are you also including custom fee in your amount? I know international taxes and duties add a lot as well.
I have only ever been charged custom fees on one deck that I've bought, and I cannot even remember what it was. It hasn't been recently. I think I bought it in I think it might even have been the Cute and Creepy Tarot. That's how it was. But for some reason, I never seem to get touch all of the wood in the world, but I never seem to get hit with custom fees.
Good.
Stuff seems to go through customs really easy for me. So.
Awesome. Cool. All right. Well, we shall end it here. Just an FYI, we do have our next 3 girls scheduled for August 19th, and that will be on Sarah's channel. Is that Sarah's channel? Heather's channel? Which
no, Sarah's channel.
Sarah's channel.
Julie's channel. Wasn't it Julie's channel?
Oh, it's my channel? It's on my channel? Sorry, my bad. Shit.
Isn't it?
I don't know.
I have no idea. It's not on mine because I did the last one.
It's on my channel. It's on my channel. Sorry.
I'm pretty sure it's on
my God. Time to go.
We'll figure it out and we'll post. One of us will post a thing anyway.
It's on my channel. August 19th, my channel. Be there, be square. Okay. Thank y'all. Thank you so much. And until the next time, much love and take care.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.